Ethan was 27 years old when he started feeling like life was moving without him. Every morning he woke up tired, not because he did not sleep, but because his mind never really rested. He had dreams once, big ones. He wanted to build something meaningful. He wanted to make his family proud. He wanted to become the kind of man his younger self believed he would be. But somewhere along the way, life became heavy. Bills, work, pressure, comparison, responsibilities, and the quiet fear that maybe he was not becoming who he was supposed to be. One Sunday afternoon, Ethan visited his mother. She had been cleaning the house and asked him to help sort through an old wooden box that had been sitting in the storeroom for years. Inside were old photographs, letters, documents, and small things his father had kept. His father had passed away many years ago, and although Ethan rarely spoke about it, there were still days when he wished he could ask him for advice. As he reached deeper into the box, his hand touched something cold. It was an old watch, his father's watch. The leather strap was worn, the glass had scratches, but it still looked strong, like it had survived many difficult years. Ethan held it quietly. For a moment, he was no longer 27. He was a little boy again, sitting beside his father, watching him fix things around the house. His father was not a rich man. He did not have a perfect life. But he had something Ethan always remembered. He kept going. Even when life was hard, even when money was tight, even when nobody praised him for his sacrifices, he showed up. Every single day. Ethan remembered one evening clearly. He was still a child, and he had asked his father, "How do you keep going when things are difficult?" His father looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "You do not need to win every day. You just need to not give up on the person you are becoming." At the time, Ethan did not fully understand those words, but years later, sitting there with that old watch in his hand, they finally made sense. He realized he had been judging his life only by what he had not achieved yet. The money he had not made, the goals he had not reached, the success he had not built. But he had forgotten something important. He was still trying, still learning, still surviving, still becoming, and maybe that mattered more than he had been giving himself credit for. That night, Ethan took the watch home. He placed it on his desk, next to his notebook, where he had written goals he had almost abandoned. For a long time, he just stared at it. Then he opened the notebook and wrote one sentence. "I do not need to become successful overnight. I just need to become better than yesterday." The next morning, he woke up early. Not because everything suddenly became easy, but because something inside him had changed. He went for a walk, he cleaned his room, he updated his plans, he started learning again. He called his mother more often. He stopped comparing his life to people who were walking a different path. And slowly, he began rebuilding himself. Not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. Some days were still difficult. There were days he felt tired. Days he questioned himself. Days he wondered if anything was really changing. But every time doubt came back, he looked at the watch, and it reminded him of something simple. Time keeps moving, and so must we. Months passed. Ethan was not a completely different person, but he was no longer standing still. He was more patient, more disciplined, more grateful, more aware of the kind of man he wanted to become. And one evening, while watching the sunset, he looked at the old watch on his wrist and smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, he did not feel behind. He felt present. He felt proud. Not because he had everything figured out, but because he had stopped giving up on himself. And maybe that was the lesson his father had left behind all along. Life is not only about reaching the finish line, it is about who you become while you are still walking. So if you feel lost right now, please remember this. You do not need to fix your whole life today. You do not need to prove everything immediately. You do not need to become perfect before you begin again. Just take one honest step, then another, then another. Because one day, you may look back and realize that the small steps you almost ignored were quietly building the life you once prayed for. And if nobody has told you this lately, let this be your reminder. You are still becoming, and that is something worth believing in.